my name is Kate Paesani and I work at CARLA. I want to thank all of you for coming today. We're delighted to have such a robust crowd for this Teaching Idea Roundtable today. So as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I'm going to introduce the speakers and then talk a little bit about the format of the roundtable today. We're experimenting with a new format for this. It won't be a traditional paper session, but I'll get to that in just a minute. And before I introduce our speakers, I just want to let you know that we still have some other talks coming up this semester. The next one is on October 29th. I want to also mention the one that's taking place on November 12th. This is a webinar with the co-editors of a new journal that's published by the American Association of University Supervisors and Coordinators. The journal is called Second Language Research and Practice, and we're going to be talking about what the journal is all about. We'll be introducing the inaugural issue, which just dropped today. And we'll also be talking about how you can publish your work in this journal. So we hope you can make it to that webinar as well. So today we have, 7 presenters. And all of the people who are presenting today received a scholarship to attend a CARLA Summer Institute in summer 2020. Some folks received a scholarship directly from CARLA. The P&A faculty who participated received scholarships from CARLA, and graduate teaching assistants received scholarships from the CLA Language Center. So our presenters today are Celia Bravo Díaz from the Department of Spanish and Portuguese Studies, Vivian Franco Díaz, also from the Department of Spanish and Portuguese Studies, Chloe Hagan from the Department of French and Italian, Sally Kessler, also from the Department of French and Italian, Hai Liu from Ames, James Ramsberg from Spanish and Portuguese Studies, and Katrine Van P, also from Ames. So I'm not going to read the titles to their talks because we would be here for way too long, but you can see them there, and you'll also see them in the names of the breakout rooms that they're going to be presenting in. So let me explain the format. So we're going to have 3 different sessions for this roundtable. So each presenter is assigned to one breakout room, and they will stay in that breakout room for all 3 sessions. You as participants will move from breakout room to breakout room to be able to hear 3 different presentations during the roundtable. So when you're in the breakout room, the presenter will give a presentation of approximately 3 to 5 minutes long, and then there will be Q&A with members of the audience in that breakout room. At the end of the session, you'll then move to a different breakout room to hear another presentation, and then you'll move again to hear a 3rd presentation. We will be broadcasting announcements during the breakout room sessions to let you know how much time is left. We're going to signal when the presenter should stop speaking to allow Q&A to start, and then we'll also signal when it's time to change rooms. And then we'll ask you to come back to the main room at the end of the 3rd breakout room session for just a final wrap up. One important thing to be able to participate in this, you must have the latest version of Zoom to be able to use the breakout feature that allows you to move from room to room. So if you haven't updated your Zoom client in the last week to 10 days, you might want to log out right now, update your client, and then come back into the session. One more thing that I want to mention is that the presentation is going to be recorded. And so by participating, you give your consent to be recorded. And we post these talks on the CARLA website. So the timing of the sessions, and I want to make sure that I'm going to be done. I will be, yeah. So the first session will go from 12:10 to 12:20. Then you'll switch to another breakout room. 12:20 to 12:30 is the second session, and then we'll switch. And then 12:30 to 12:40 is the 3rd breakout session. And then we'll come back to the main room at 12:40 for a brief wrap up. So let me now explain how you're going to move from breakout room to breakout room in case you're not familiar with this new format. So to find the breakout room that you want to join, you have a screenshot there on the right-hand side of the slide that shows the names of all of the presentations. And to go to a breakout room, you just click on the breakout room icon at the bottom of your screen. And when that comes up, you'll see that what it looks like in that screenshot on the slide. To join the breakout room, you hover over the name at the right of the title, or over the number, I'm sorry. So you see the number 1, the number 0, etc. Hover over that and you'll get something that says join. You click on join and that's how you enter the breakout room. Then when you want to switch to the next breakout room for session 2, you do exactly the same thing. You click on the breakout room icon at the bottom of your screen, hover over the number of the session that you want to attend on the right-hand side of the pop-up window, click join, and then you go into that breakout room. So I think we're ready to start our first session. So if the presenters haven't already gone to their breakout rooms, you want to ask that they do that. And then the rest of you just choose the session that you'd like to go to. And we're going to keep the names of the sessions up on the slide. Have a great time, and we'll be sending messages to let you know when it's time to switch.
Really briefly, before I introduce my unit plan. So the summer workshop that I attended with CARLA this summer, the title was Critical Approaches to Heritage Language Education. And it was a 1-week intensive course. We met during 5 days for almost 7 hours every day. And the objective of the course was to explore different approaches to heritage language education, and also to explore together the existing power dynamics and their origins. And we shared and we reflected on personal experiences in and outside the classroom. It was a really great mix of people, because apart from graduate students that had studied heritage language education from a theoretical point of view, but we didn't have any experience in the classroom, we had a lot of people that had been teaching for years in heritage language programs. And we really had a great opportunity to ask a lot of questions, and we really learned a lot from them. Most of them were teaching in high school programs, and some of them had also taught at the university level. So what we did, each one adapted their goals. And me personally, I developed it wasn't a teaching philosophy, because I had never taught Spanish as a heritage language, but it was a vision for the education of Spanish as a heritage language. And I also developed a unit plan. So what I did in my unit plan was a description of the course. It was an imaginary course. And then a curricular approach description, and unit overview, and then a sequencing of the unit that I would like to teach, and then also description of the materials that I would use. So the description of the course, it would be a 5th semester Spanish course, similar to 3015 in our department, so advanced Spanish composition and communication. So like the first content-based course in the curriculum. And then it would be designed specifically to meet the particular needs of heritage learners of Spanish. And the goal would be to build upon this knowledge and experience, both sociocultural knowledge and linguistic knowledge that the students bring to the classroom, to expand their oral and written registers. So the focus would be to improve their reading skills and reading skills, and also explore issues related to their identity, their cultures, and fostering their connections with the Hispanic communities inside and outside of Minnesota in this case. So this was the curricular approach that we studied in the Summer Institute. And this model is, I think, has a lot of potential and practical applications to the classroom. It emerged out of 5 years of action research. And the foundation is community knowledge and inquiry. So the basic idea is that we need to be aware and explore all the knowledge and community ties of our students, and then build our units and our program of study from all that knowledge that the students already bring to the classroom. And the unit overview, I took the basic outline from this really great book that was published in 2020, and that has a whole section devoted to project-based learning for Spanish in higher education with heritage students. And the instructional strategies, project-based learning, and the estimated duration of this unit would be 6 class periods. Each class period would be like 1 hour and 15 minutes, more or less. And it would involve many hours of out of the classroom work. And the desired outcomes. So the project, I named it Cartografía de la Historia Personal y Familiar, so cartography of the personal and family story. And the main objectives would be that students identify different ways of preserving personal and family ties, archives, and then describe the life story and cultural legacy of their most immediate community. And the linguistic goals were the use of past tenses, so preterite, imperfect, pluperfect, and the development of different devices that are characteristic of the formal varieties of written Spanish and oral Spanish as well. So the sequencing, so I divided it into 4 cycles. So in the preparation cycles where we determined the project and the outcomes, I used 2 different sources for authentic materials, and I structured my activities around those sources. And they're really amazing archives that I found. One is the project Cartas a la Familia, or Family Letters, that was developed by the University of Nebraska. And it also has lesson plans that are already made that are structured around different topics. So what I used these resources as the base to design listening, reading comprehension activities, and also to discuss different issues related to different varieties of Spanish. And then I also used, after this research, I used the oral narratives from Latinos in Ohio as an example of how to create interviews, questions, and to come up with different topics that the students could include in their project, in their final project. So in the information gathering cycle, this included 3 interviews with different members of their communities. This could be their family members or other people from Hispanic origin, Spanish speakers that they knew in their communities. And so there were 3 interviews followed by a written reflection. And to structure this, I explored this platform that is also open access, and that I thought it was very appropriate for students to divide and present their reflections, because apart from text, they could include photos, they could link those texts to maps, And they could also share their reflections with me and with other students, and I would be able to make my comments on their reflections. And then in the third part, the students already had all the information that they were going to use for their storytelling projects. Basically we would have in-class workshops to work on the information, to select the relevant information, to structure it and organize it, and then to work on the linguistic aspects of the unit. And then in the display cycle, we would share these projects with the class and possibly with the community. And we would make an in-classroom reflection also about their projects, not only talking about content, but also about language skills, academic skills, and also about technology skills that they had learned. So the final project would be this portfolio consisting on their storytelling project that would take the form of a digital book, or just, like a storytelling, like a timeline with different information, pictures, and also their reflections, their 3 reflections. So that was what I designed for this unit. And I can send you, I included my email here. So if you would like to see the different documents, I could share them with you.
Hi, I'm going to present the IPA unit, How do migrants create a sense of home and belonging in a new place? How can youth contribute to this process? I developed this IPA unit at the CARLA Summer Institute 2020, taught by Donna Clementi. I use a format developed by Clementi in 2018 based on the standards-based integrated performance assessment, IPA. The language and level for this unit is Spanish at the college level for intermediate high. The approximate length of this unit is 5 weeks, 75 minutes a day, twice a week. The theme and topic are immigration studies and belonging. The essential questions are: how do migrants create a sense of home and belonging in a new place? How can youth contribute to this process? The unit goals: learners will be able to define immigrant, migrant, and immigrant, explain the complexity of the concepts of home and belonging in the context of immigration migration, identify reasons why Latinos immigrate to the United States, provide examples of how migrants create a sense of home and belonging in a new place, compare attitudes towards migrants in the United States and in Latin America, reflect on how attitudes towards migrants could challenge the idea of home and belonging for migrants new in a place, and share ideas about how youth can contribute to create a sense of home and belonging for migrants. The following are the summative performance tags. For the interpretive mode, students are going to read a research study about the intersection between incorporation and transnationalism from a gender perspective in order to find out how Latino migrants create a sense of home and belonging in the United States. Read the statistical report about opinión pública sobre la migración and reflect how these perceptions could challenge the idea of home and belonging for immigrants new in a place. They are going to watch a video about the campaign Te doy la bienvenida in order to understand challenges that immigrants face in Uruguay and the mission and steps of this campaign. They're going to watch videos of youth supporting migrants to find out their motivations and ideas to do so. For the presentational mode, in small groups, students are going to create a television-based advocacy advertising in order to present ways and motivate youth about how to contribute to create a sense of home and belonging for migrants new to the local area. And for the interpersonal mode, In groups, they are going to consider the essential questions, discuss and share possible answers and ideas to these questions. These are the can-do statements for each mode: interpretive, presentational, interpersonal, and intercultural communication. For the supporting functions, the students are going to be asking and responding questions, providing opinions with reasons, comparing and contrasting, retelling migrant stories. And so for this, they would need supporting structures such as interrogatives, indicative and subjunctive, adverbs, adjectives, conjunctions, and some priority vocabulary, such as inmigrantes, migrantes, emigrantes, sentido de casa, sentido de pertenencia, juventud, nuevo lugar, territorio, nación, país, integración, contribución, publicidad con causa únicamente social en la televisión. This is a list of key learning activities or formative assessment. And I also explain here how these activities support the unit goals. For example, they're going to watch the video about cuál es la diferencia entre migrante, inmigrante, inmigrante. They're going to read the article about ni aquí ni allá, nociones de hogar y sentido de pertenencia en el contexto de migración. And so they're going to share these definitions and how they can be complex, and also support their answers with examples and contracts and compare these definitions to what they call home and belonging. They're going to watch videos about the stories of Latino immigrants in the United States to find out their motivations that led them to immigrate to this country. And also they're going to ask their relatives if they have immigration stories that they can share with us in the class, and then make comparisons of what they watch in the videos and if they are similar or different from their relatives' immigration stories. They're going to also watch videos of Latino immigrant stories and share how they try to create a sense of home and belonging in the United States. Read a statistical report about perceptions. Read a description by the National Organization for Migration to find out general principles for the integration of immigrants in a nation, and also read a definition of advocacy advertising and watch some examples. And these are some of the resources that I used. Thank you.
So thank you so much, everyone, for coming and listening to my session today. I'm going to talk about some activities that I developed during the session, during the Summer Institute Foreign Language Literacies, using target language text to improve communication, and that was with Kate Paesani and Mandy Menke. So if I'm talking about a multiliteracies approach to teaching French bande dessinée or graphic novels, the first thing I am going to talk about is what is a multiliteracies approach, and how does that look? What does that look like if I'm teaching different languages? So a multiliteracies approach is built around increasing students' literacy, which is the ability to create meaning through a variety of multimodal texts. And it does this by engaging students in knowledge processes of experiencing, applying, analyzing, and conceptualizing, and having them do activities in the target language that has them build on all of these things. So moving on, what does that look like in practice? So some types of activities that get students experiencing and learning and raising their literacy skills in that way are exploring familiar and new ideas. And for conceptualizing, students connect language and meaning through texts. For analyzing, students question the complexity of culture, language, and ideas. And a lot of that is done by asking why type questions. And for applying, students create texts and showcase new knowledge. So I'm going to talk about a series of activities that I expanded on for the third semester French curriculum at St. Olaf College. The activities I'm talking about are not activities that I developed myself necessarily. A lot of the credit for developing these initially goes to my colleague at St. Olaf College, Libby Yoshioka Maxwell. but I expanded on these activities in order to give you some examples of what multiliteracies pedagogy looks like in practice in a classroom. So the text I am working with and that I am teaching this semester at St. Paul College is L'écaille d'Esther, Histoire de mes 10 ans. And this is a graphic novel, or bande dessinée, by Riyad Satouf, and it was published in 2018. This graphic novel follows the story of Esther, and it's written in a very autobiographical style. She is a young French girl who talks about her daily life, her experiences at school with her family, and her perspective on the events that happen around her. So one activity that gets students experiencing the language is having them write an autobiography in the style that this girl presents at the beginning of this graphic novel. So she introduces herself, she talks about where she's from, she talks about her family, and then goes on and talks about her life at school. So I had my students write a short autobiography in French in which they introduced themselves and talked about themselves based on this same style. For a conceptualizing activity, I had students look up French cultural references and slang words. And I'm going to see if this video will play. It'll play after the ad, so give me a moment. I had students look up slang words that they were seeing in the French graphic novel and then compare it with words that they were hearing in this song. Compare and contrast perspectives on current events that were being portrayed in this graphic novel. So here we see a description of when the Charlie Hebdo attacks happened in France in 2015. And we see Esther's perspective on this, how she sees the adults around her reacting, and then how she reacts. And then I ask students to compare and contrast the perspectives of adults and children that you see here, and then to ask, why do you think these different groups of people have these different perspectives, and what does that show you about how they see the world? So moving on, as an applying activity, I had students retell a historical event. So in this panel, we see Esther learning in school about the 100 Years' War, and she's learning about Joan of Arc, who is saving the heir Charles. And the word for that in French is le dauphin, which in English is the same word for the animal, a dolphin. And so Esther imagines that Joan of Arc is rescuing this dolphin. And so I asked my students to retell a historical event in the same way that Esther imagines the 100 Years' War taking place, where you take a very childlike interpretation of an event and then retell it in very simplistic terms. So that was an activity that I had my students do as a homework exercise and then to present what they had written about in class. So those are some ideas that I had about applying multiliteracies in my class that I'm teaching this semester. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
Hi, here is my recording of my portfolio project. Let me share my screen with you. I had a scholarship to take a class on portfolios, and there are different kinds of portfolios. You can have a summative one at the end that's really polished, or you can have a process portfolio, which is where students submit work at regular intervals. They set their own goals, and then they self-evaluate, they track their own goals, and they track how strategies are working for them. So just to put everything in context, I had I have beginning French students, and I want them to build a portfolio to show their formative growth. At the beginning stage, it's hard for students to know what strategies work for them, as well as even being able to tell the amazing progress that they're making. So the goals are to scaffold student choice and construction of knowledge, promote student collaboration, and also support access in these Zoomy times. There's a rationale. These are all hyperlinked if you want to read about ACTFL or Cramps's research. So we have unit, daily, and semester-long I can statements. And so that way students know what to expect from me. They know what I want them to get out of the class. And then they set their own goals and track how those goals are going, submitting regular work, and all of the final deadline is due at Thanksgiving, because expect the unexpected in 2020. If anyone's an essential worker, if anyone's taking care of their siblings, then they can slide the work into December. This is all standardized grading, so the point is not using a normative grading scale. The point is not when students complete the work, just that they learned something by December, that they're ready for the next chapters in the book after they leave my classroom. And all this work, students are working on their own, or if they're doing shared Google Slides, it's asynchronous. It doesn't interfere with their DRC accommodation, so it's also pretty accessible. Okay, so there is a link in the slides that I'll be happy to share with you. Students get a rationale just like I just described to you. And every unit, I put students in a group. Students report on a country. The country must, their report must relate to one I can statement somewhere in the unit. And students have to identify the statement and why the report meets that end. And they can justify their rationale in English. And so far, I've been doing it this semester, and students have been using Google Slides. So like one person has one slide, one person has the other slide. So it's asynchronous, and over a period of a few weeks, they can work together and build their collaboration skills. So here's a country report shared with student permission. There's a bibliography on the last slide of the words that they looked up, what dictionary they used. So it says school. I am 11 years old. I am in my last year of primary school. I go to school from 8 to 1. My favorite class is math. My favorite class at school is math. And next year I will be in secondary school. And so this is for the Madagascar country. Individually, students set SMART goals at the beginning of the unit. And we learned what SMART goals were at the beginning of the year. And then they identify specific top-down or bottom-up strategies that they're going to try that unit. And then they give themselves a grade 1, 2, 3, 4 for being the best at the end of the unit, and talk about couple sentences what strategies are working for them. So here is a SMART goal shared with student permission. And she said, I want to be able to know the whole French alphabet and be able to tell time in French. And so this is kind of a way for students to have realistic goals. At the beginning level, sometimes they get frustrated that they're not fluent right away. And so this is a way for them to actually, okay, I will learn 26 letters. I will learn like X number of things. And then week by week, students have a search log. And so they have to say, okay, I spent 30 minutes. I used context clues as my strategy, and I listened to Spotify. And overall, by December, I want students to have 12 hours recorded. And this can include switching their Netflix to French. That's not necessarily like culturally enriching. Or they can listen to Spotify in the background while they're doing their homework. They can watch a podcast that relates to their major. So for example, this student said she watched the movie Amélie. She watched it in French with French subtitles. So very impressive. That lasted for 2 hours. And she used context clues, and she picked out the words that she did know. And so she feels I can read a lot in French. However, understanding what I am hearing is hard. So like that's reasonable, right? And so I can put little comments because these are Google Docs. Like, oh, fantastic. C'est super. So because we're talking about evaluation, my self-evaluation, so scaffolding student choice, I'm noticing that students are discussing specific strategies they choose to use in their search logs. This was a lot of work in the summer. I spent about a week just like doing all the things, and like this was a lot of work in the summer for me to think about my rationale and how to put it together. Promoting student collaboration. In the Google Slides, I can look at their history. Sometimes I'm CC'd in their email exchanges. Their comments and docs that they are making for each other. They're sharing Quizlets like as well that I'm noticing. And this might just be because we're on Zoom and we're used to sharing stuff. This might have nothing to do with my class. Some students do not have Google Suites. So especially international students who are not in this country, that's a bummer for Google Suites. They have to do everything on a Microsoft Doc and then transfer it over. Students, and of course I give them all the documents in PDF from Microsoft. There were also students who dropped right away. And so like groups of 3 became groups of 2, or students who were hard to get a hold of via email. And increasing access in these Zoomy times. Pro is that a couple of students joined the class after about a week, like right before the cutoff, but they'll just work together in December. Students can work asynchronously. And there's this tendency, I think, going along with collaboration to foster interdependence, which is one of the 10 principles of disability justice. So that's a good access piece, anti-ableist piece. A con is that there's nothing built into here that's explicitly anti-racist. And Dr. Randolph Jr. warns us to avoid tokenism. You can't just put like someone from the African diaspora into a slide and say that you're being inclusive, right? Like, so there's nothing built into this project that is anti-racist, and that would be the goal. All right, thank you.
I would like to share how I used the multimedia way to help students to understand a short Chinese poem. The reason why is every single Chinese kid growing up learning Chinese poems, they can recite the poems even before they can read or write. So this is a very important cultural factors. And if our advanced Chinese learners gonna enter the professional world, they are gonna communicate with people, and they should be able to understand those important Chinese cultural factors. 对。I divided the whole semester into 3 parts. The first part is talking about Chinese history, and then second part is Chinese poems, and not only Tang poems, but also like the earlier one or the later one. And then the third part is more like students choose what they want to read or what they want to listen to. So at this stage, students already know all the historical background of this poem, and they already know all the dynasties and the history of China. So because there are like historical events behind those poems. So when they read the poems, they're not only reading from it, but they're also reading the historical events, like how the establishment of Han Dynasty, and also the 3 kingdoms.
Yeah.
So it's more interesting. If you just give them a poem, they probably will not be very interested. So yeah, you are already very familiar with this poem, and we know that how important the poem is in Chinese culture. And it's very lucky it happened to me that I happened to find this TV show that talks about poems, and gives detailed talks about the historical background, also cultural background of those poems. And so when I decide to teach Chinese poem, I have two goals in mind. One is they understand the cultural background or historical events behind it. And the second is about language. I want that when they watch this authentic video clip that is 40 minutes long without English subtitles, I want them to not be panic, and they should get themselves familiarized with the authentic video clips. And if they encounter any limitation of vocabulary, they should be able to fill the gap with the context and with the knowledge that they already know. So those are my two goals. And for this poem, I have specific goals, like students will be able to report the fact about the poem and identify the different editions of the poem, compare them, and identify the cultural factors discussed about them. So first, the students have to read the poem and translate the poem into modern Chinese, and also they have to be able to introduce the author. That gives students refreshment of their memory if they already know the poem. If they don't, then this gives them a basic idea of what they are going to learn in this chapter. And then I have some activities. The first one is to watch the video once without pausing and without looking at anything up on the dictionary. I just want them to experience this video, and from the first time they can experience it, and they can link their old knowledge with the new one that they are not familiar with. And then the second one will be experiencing and conceptualizing. So they I'll have to give them opportunities to explore the language form and the meaning relationship. And also I want them, I can give them some explicit instructions so that they understand the details of the videos. And then they do the analyzing, they do the discussion. So they have the discussion board, and they can discuss about the cultural factors. And because all those three activities are asynchronous, so they have to finish all those three tasks before coming to class and do the discussion and the projects. So I also want them to feel like they are always the instructor is always there and help them. So I also give them the opportunity to meet with me and discuss questions that they do not know. And this is the first experiencing activity I want them to do when they watch the video for the first time. They explore something that they're familiar, and also they explore the new ideas. This also gives them a chance to self-reflect. So when they watch the video, they know what they should focus on and what they should what they already know. So they have three. This is a text matrix, and students can say, oh, I can explain this thing. I have heard it, but I don't really know about it, and it's completely new to me. And then I list some things, because students sometimes they need a detailed instruction. If they just ask them to hear anything that they are familiar with, then they probably don't know what they need to talk about. So I give them some guidelines. So like, for example, the items, for example, the tea, the garden decoration, and the costumes and all that, if they are familiar with, or the facts, for example, this poem was written by Li Bai, and when he wrote it and where, and something like that. And also the cultural factors, for example, the cultural factors that the people mentioned in the video, for example, if they value farmers more than a businessman, or how children should treat their parents, something like that. Those are cultural factors. And also historical events, for example, the establishment of Tang and the emperor and all that. So with this text metrics in mind, when students watch the video, they have something in mind that what they should explore. And after that, they can exchange their forms with other students. So then they can get a basic idea of what this video talks about. And they understand over 50% of it. So they know the basic ideas. They probably do not know the details, but they know the basic ideas. So that familiarize with the authentic video clip, and give them more confidence to keep watching more. And then I go to the second activity, that is conceptualizing. So I want them to explore language form and forming relationships. So what I do is I give them some questions. For example, when you watch the show, what are the roles of each person in the videos? Like, can you guess who is the host, who are the guests? Are those three guests all the same, or some guests are like more senior than the other and with more authorities? And then they have to find out words such as pronouns or the grammatical moves, for example, imperative or subjunctive, etc., and expressions they use when communicating to justify their assumptions. For example, this one is a guest because he always uses imperative sentences. And this one is the junior like guest, and she always uses respectful forms to other people. So they have to justify, and then they can generalize rules that the Chinese people communicate. Because this is important for advanced learner when they enter the professional world. They need to know how to communicate with different people who are higher than you, people who are like younger than you, like how do you communicate properly. And another thing I do at this stage is to to give the explicit instruction. So like the prepositive pauses, give them like what they should do. And also I give them no questions so they can self-reflect. I understand or I still do not understand, but no matter what they choose, I give them the answer. So before they read the answer, they first have to think if they understand, and they have to do some self-reflect, and then this can deepen their understanding. And then they can also find a way to ask questions. So with these three steps, students asynchronous activities, the students already get familiar with the video, and they already know the poem. So when they come to the class, they can have a good discussion. This is the presentation.
So my topic was a multiliteracies approach to language variation and change in Spanish. And a bit of context for this lesson plan, includes 2 text-based lessons written for a Spanish course in our department, Introduction to the Study of Hispanic Linguistics. And it's for undergraduates who have completed the language sequence or tested out of it, and also a 3000 level composition course. It's one of the final gateways to true upper division content, and it's their first experience with linguistics in our department. In terms of their competency, generally intermediate, high to advanced low. Of course, that varies. And I chose diachronic variation because it wasn't really addressed in the current curriculum. There was a bit of it at the end of the course, short textbook reading, but I thought for such a complex concept and a concept they would come in contact with in those upper division courses, it could be treated more thoroughly and in a more integrated way. So as an overview of the first lesson, so Traveling Through Time and Translation, an introduction to diachronic variation in Spanish. And this is more the how of language change. So what at the language level, how do you do textual analysis as a historical linguist? And so I chose for this, the text was Don Quixote in 3 versions of its introductory paragraph, one in the original early modern Spanish, one in a contemporary standard peninsular Spanish, and then one in Spanglish. Of course, Spanish has not become Spanglish. That's not a perfect parallel there, but it does offer an interesting opportunity to look at language change in maybe a different way. In terms of the summary, sort of the main idea of this lesson is that students are using text matrices to identify what are the linguistic changes between these 3 different versions. And so they're looking at the level of the lexicon, morphosyntax, semantics, phonology, etc., orthography, to identify so what the changes are, hypothesize connections between the changes, and yeah, just get practice as being sort of a mock historical linguist. In terms of sort of what this looks like, this is just the first sentence of those paragraphs, but you can see there is some changes, I think especially in these examples, orthographic, but of course orthographic change sometimes corresponds with phonetic or phonological changes. And then of course in the Spanglish there are various English loan words and calcs and things. So it is a pretty maybe rich opportunity that they can look at language variation in a controlled environment. In terms of the second language, it's called Plus Ultra. It's the motto of Spain, further beyond, the development of Spanish as a national language. And this was more the how of language variation. So what are the extra linguistic factors that are influencing language change? And for this, I chose 4 chronological texts, excerpts from those, of course, related to sort of Spanish language policy. So you have the first grammar of the Spanish language, the Nueva Planta decrees, which mandated Spanish in the public sphere, some Francoist propaganda, and then the current Spanish constitution. And the main idea of this is that students are in expert groups interacting with these excerpts, these language policies, and then they are then sharing with each other and trying to better understand how these policies contributed to Spanish being, right, the national language of Spain and the language that we know of when we think of Spain, despite Spain always having been a very multilingual place with its various minority languages. And a key part of this lesson, and you can see this in the last learning objective on the bottom right, is that students at the very end try to develop more inclusive language policies by playing with the genre, actually rewriting their excerpts to see how could I change this, and again, following conventions and textual features to make it more inclusive, right? So if I was writing the Gramática de Lengua Castellana in 1492, how could I rewrite it to make it inclusive of Spain's minority languages? And to finish here, here's just, again, examples of what these sort of look like. This is an excerpt from the excerpt in which Nebrija, the grammarian, is talking to the Spanish Queen Isabel about the necessity, right, of imposing Spanish upon the new subjects of the Queen in the New World. And so the connection between Spanish and empire, and then how does that relate with this sort of newspaper ad from the Francoist era in which you're supposed to speak well, be a patriot by speaking Spanish. And so that's the work that the students are doing, is parsing, right, understanding what is the meaning of these texts and then putting them in conversation with each other to understand how Spanish became such an important language in Spain. And that is my time.
I participated in an institute this summer that was called Teaching Language Through the Lens of Social Justice. And I thought it was really very well done and very enriching. I had designed and had been teaching a curriculum, especially at the advanced Arabic level, that revolved heavily around social justice issues. But I was uncertain of what full-blown social justice pedagogy, with a capital letter on each of these words, actually is. And I was hoping that the Institute would give me an understanding of how to embed my own curriculum into an actual social justice pedagogy framework. Let me move the slide forward here. There we go. That is indeed one of the things that I got out of the Institute. The model of social justice education that we explored made it clear to me that while my curriculum already included many of its components, one thing that was really missing was the component described as equipping students with tools for action and social change, which of course does not have to mean taking students to a picket line or taking students to a protest, but rather strengthening their understanding of the ways in which they can enact positive change in their communities. For the nuts and bolts work of unit redesign, we used the backward design approach, plus I called it, in the sense that it was enhanced, if you will, with a number of components that make it work for social justice education. For example, in addition to the essential questions and the unique goals that one identifies in the backward design model, we were also asked to identify social justice takeaways. And we evaluated not only how well our activities and assessments aligned with the world readiness standards, which we're all very familiar with, but we also measured them against a set of social justice standards, which to me and a lot of other participants, in fact, felt maybe a little bit more meaningful than the World Readiness Standards, which for all their usefulness, sometimes could maybe sound just a tad bit bland. The main unit I revisited during the Institute was one that is called Art and Community in Times of Crisis. And the essential questions for that unit include, for example, what should be the place of access to art and forms of artistic expression compared to the meeting of what is considered a typical basic need like food, shelter, healthcare, and such, for communities who are going through a crisis. The social justice takeaways for this unit included, for example, that art and artistic expression play a variety of roles at the communal level and that their importance is very much not limited to the expression of emotion. I already had a lot of activities that were part of this unit and formative assessments that were appropriately arched and that hit the various modes of communication. However, the main missing piece from this unit was that action component that would equip students with tools for social change. And I wanted this to take shape in the form of a semester-long project that would result in a product that had actual use in the community. What I came up with was move the slide here, was a two-part project. On the one hand, for a minimum 6 weeks of the semester, students complete an arts-related portfolio activity by choosing an activity from an extensive list of options that I provide. Then they engage with it for a certain amount of time, and then they complete a report form on it. This more or less independent exploration of the work of Arab artists then culminates in the organization by the students as a group of a public event over Zoom, for which they invite 2 Arab artists and feature their work and engage with them and their work. I laid out the timeline for the event planning, the responsibilities that the students would need to take on, and then I made a small amount of money available for honoraria. But it is really the students themselves who are in charge of the event. And the action piece of the social justice model here takes shape in the students offering an opportunity to the public to engage with the work of these artists and to learn about the issues and causes that are important to these artists. We have made a start on the unit this week, and we're still practicing vocabulary and such. But we have been working on the project since the start of the semester. And so far the students seem really into it and they're taking the event planning component very seriously. They did an initial brainstorm of ideas for the event in Canvas last week. We used the class period to hammer out their ideas. They've now chosen their artists who they would like to write invitation emails to. And one thing I find very interesting is that one of the first things that the students came up with was that they would like the event to be a fundraiser for a cause. That is their idea. It's not imposed by me, but of course it fits really well with the social justice orientation of the unit and of the project.
I think everybody's back now. We want to thank you very much for your patience and good cheer as we did this for the first time. I think this might be the first time that the CARLA staff has actually gotten mad at me. Maybe mad is too strong of a word, but this was all my idea and we didn't realize that there were going to be so many bumps in the road doing it. So I take full responsibility for anybody's frustration during this process. But I hope that you enjoyed interacting with folks and hearing about these projects. We want to thank the presenters for presenting the same thing 3 times and for being willing to experiment with us. I also forgot to mention that this presentation has been co-sponsored by the CARLA Language Center. They helped support the scholarship program, so I want to give them a thank you. And I want to make a couple of announcements. I just want to mention that we're going to be running this scholarship, the Summer Institute Scholarship Program again. So there'll be scholarships for both P&A faculty and graduate students to participate in CARLA Summer Institutes. So this is the lineup of Summer Institutes for 2021. They're going to be offered in June and July. You can see that we have a very robust program planned. We're going to be doing a number of online institutes. Some of them are synchronous, some of them are asynchronous, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that we're also going to be able to do some face-to-face institutes, provided that the pandemic is under control and it's safe to do so. So you can see the institute names, you can see the dates that all of these are running and the format in which they're going to be running. This is going to be up on the CARLA website soon. And also, I think what's highlighted in red, and Karen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are the summer institutes that the participants in today's session actually attended.